James Zobel once spoke here at the library, and the audience, including myself, were quite taken by James' ability in rendering General Douglas MacArthur's return to the Philippines in the battle at Leyte Gulf. Some historians in rarefied academic circles have difficulty presenting their otherwise brilliant research findings in clear language for the public to understand. I wasn't referring to you. You're pretty clear. James works in a city-funded library, Norfolk, Virginia, which serves the general public. And so the clarity in his historical rendering is refreshing, and it prods us to read more and appreciate history. 30 years ago, I used to look for and research photographs of World War II Philippines by going to archives in various countries or going to antique centers or attending photo fairs. I was lucky at times, other times not. With the advent, though, of the internet, eBay, YouTube, Facebook, I no longer have to go out and look for them. Now the photographs are available to me and offered exactly to what my search needs are. You add this technological convenience with the passing away of the World War II generation and their personal possessions, including war memorabilia, winding up donated to libraries or found in estate sales or flea markets. The quantity, therefore, of World War II Philippine photographs and materials available today have quintupled. I now come across many photographs of one subject matter. Before, I used to only have one shot of the bombed-out Manila Cathedral many years ago, but now there's the same bombed-out cathedral, many angles taken by American soldiers with their Kodak Brownie cameras. I have now seen vast parts of destroyed Manila from the air, by districts, and even by streets. Seeing the wide expanse of a destroyed city, many of us, historians, heritage activists, and lovers of a beautiful city, raise questions, but we get few unsatisfying answers. We ask, was the massive destruction of the city of Manila that necessary? Could there have been other alternatives to spare the city? Did the Japanese last stand to the death necessitate the city's obliteration? Was the American Army's use of mortar fire to lessen the casualty rate of their soldiers? Likewise, did the use of mortar fire take into consideration the presence of civilians in the city? Or were the civilians to be counted as, in the modern military parlance, collateral damage? I raised these questions as a lecture topic for James to ponder, taking advantage of his access to MacArthur books, documents, and papers. It's the subject of his talk tonight. Perhaps, the passage of time, in this case 70 years, will give us new insights and answers. For the previous generation, James' findings may provide closure. For our generation, his talk may redouble our efforts to safeguard historical truths. As you know, the current conservative and hawkish Japanese government is attempting to remake World War II history, to picture themselves as not having participated in the mass killing of Southeast Asian peoples and the sexual brutalization of women. Japan is actively finding ways to revamp their constitution that renounces war in order to rearm themselves, raising the distinct possibility of being, like China, another formidable menace in our region once more. James' lecture, therefore, is not just some intellectual dilettante blame game pointing at culprits. His lecture is to remind us to be vigilant to a past horrendous tragedy that may again repeat itself. Thank you, and now may I call on James.
Usually I talk about Douglas MacArthur, and it's a lot of fun. Douglas MacArthur, there's a lot to be admired, and there's a lot to laugh at. And usually we get into that if you've seen some of the other speeches we've done. But I'm really glad to see all of you here, and there's a lot more esteemed scholars, Dr. LaGuardia, Paul Whitman, who know more about the Battle of Manila than they've forgotten more than I'll probably ever know. But I'm very glad that everybody's here, and maybe this can add to the discussion as to what we do. Yes, I'm an archivist. I'm not really a historian. I studied in history, but for the past 20 years, I've been the one who's at Bennett MacArthur Memorial cataloging things, trying to get everything in order, so to speak. And this is the MacArthur Memorial. It's located in Norfolk, Virginia. This is the old home of Douglas MacArthur's mother, Mary Pinckney Hardy. And when he was getting into older age, 80 years old, the city of Norfolk offered him this very fine place to house all of his materials, house all of his papers. And Douglas MacArthur, I think, knew it was the closest thing he was going to get to a presidential library. And so when they offered it to him, he actually went for it and was actually going to be there to dedicate a memorial to myself. But he said, I'll be in Norfolk alive or dead, and he died right before, but he kept his promise. And so it is the final resting place of Douglas MacArthur as well as Jean. He lived to be 84 years old, died on April 5th. They buried him on April 11th, which was 13 years to the day after he got fired by President Truman. It just kind of worked out that way. Jean MacArthur lived to be 101. She lived in 3 centuries. And when we buried her, it was on the general's birthday. It just kind of worked out that way. Now, the MacArthurs, after he got fired by Truman, they lived at the Waldorf Astoria. It's probably one of the most expensive places to stay in the United States. They didn't expect Jean to live to be 101 because they gave them this crazy deal of like $300 a month. Now, what we are is we are a museum, we are the final resting place, and we are an educational center, the archives as well. This is the brand new visitor center, which we just built in 2012. But this is the Jean MacArthur Research Center, and this is where I work in the archives. We are a facility that gets about 5,000 researchers a year. As you can see here, Dr. Jose has been there many times, Ricardo Jose. That guy on the right, I don't know who that is. Now, Marie Vallejo, who has been helping me this whole time, she's never seen me in a suit before. So she's been kind of freaked out just by seeing me like this, because that's the way I usually look. But we have about 2 million documents. We have the papers of not only Douglas MacArthur, but also 18 of his generals. We also have thousands of collections, and those are all from veterans that served from the Spanish-American War all the way through World War I, World War II, occupation of Japan, the Korean War, as well as anything that has anything to do with Douglas MacArthur, they'll donate there. Now, a lot of times we'll get stuff, and I'll be like, why do I need this? And then the next day I'll say, hey, do you got any? Well, I just got that the day before. So it just kind of works out that way. Like I said, all these documents, but 100,000 odd photographs as well. And it just keeps mounting all the time. Now, as John said, the Battle for Manila, was it necessary? Here we have the Pearl of the Orient, and it was completely destroyed by World War II. This is one of the old photographs of the Intramuros, and you can see Douglas MacArthur's old house and headquarters down at the left corner, that white building on Calle Victoria, right there. Basically, World War II, the whole world collectively lost its mind. Nazi Germany, as well as imperialist Japan, decided that they were going to get their goals by taking them. The Nazis in Europe, Japan in Asia, extermination of complete races throughout. Millions dead, up to what they think now is maybe 70 million, 30 million in Russia, about 30 million in China, the extermination of the Jewish race up to 6 million. That's what I mean. The world collectively lost its mind. And in the Philippines, the worst episode, no doubt, is the Battle for Manila and the massacre of over 100,000 civilians by the Japanese as well as American artillery. And so that's what we'll be discussing tonight. The Manila Post Office, of course, seen in the throes after war. And this is taken from the Manila Hotel looking east. 2/3 of the city completely destroyed, as well as the civilian massacres. It was really the first time since the 30 Years' War in the 1600s that civilian populations became the targets. I mean, the United States erased 66 Japanese cities before they finally surrendered. The moves throughout China, most of the cities in Germany, as well as Warsaw, they call Pearl of the Orient, became the Warsaw of Asia, completely and thoroughly destroyed. MacArthur was a great believer that they had to come back to the Philippines, the United States, that is. Strategic debate was Formosa versus the Philippines. The Navy wanted to go to Formosa, Taiwan. They believed that was the fastest route to be able to destroy the Japanese Empire. MacArthur believed that the best route was through the Philippines. And he also believed that the United States had the moral obligation to liberate the Philippines. Manuel Quezon, MacArthur, compadres. Quezon believes if the United States doesn't go back to the Philippines, they will lose face in Asia for the rest of eternity. MacArthur believes this as well. And this is what he put forth to the Navy as well as President Roosevelt at Pearl Harbor, July 28, 1944. He got up for 30 minutes and spoke extemporaneously of the need to go back to the Philippines, but as well why it was more militarily sound to take the Philippines first, especially Luzon, and not go to Formosa, leaving this large Japanese concentration behind them. Now Roosevelt, who's in the center there, said this is going to be nothing more than casualties. And MacArthur said to him, good commanders don't bring you casualties. MacArthur had had this whole bypassing campaign, mostly because of code breaking during World War II, that took him to victory and gave him the opportunity to redeem that pledge, that I shall return pledge, to get back to the Philippines. This is what he convinced Roosevelt of in the Pearl Harbor Conference, that you would not have the casualties as you would have to go to Formosa, mainly because on Formosa, everybody's a hostile. In the Philippines, you're coming back. He's been working with this guerrilla movement the whole time. Everybody's waiting for the aid. Not when's the United States coming, when's the aid coming? Now, Admiral King, Ernest J. King, he was the head of the Navy. He was the foremost believer that they had to go to Formosa over the Philippines. And one of his main tenets of his argument was Manila will be destroyed if the United States goes back to the Philippines. Now, King was a very gruff, hard-to-deal-with person, hated MacArthur, couldn't stand him. Eisenhower said of King, the best thing that could happen for the Allied cause is that somebody shoots Admiral King. But he was a brilliant mind, and MacArthur even admitted later that if it wasn't for Admiral King, they would have had a strategic defensive in the Pacific forever until the war in Europe ended, and the war could have gone on until about 1948. MacArthur wins as far as the debate. It came realized that they could not go back, or they could not go to Formosa. They didn't have the shipping because of the Japanese moves into China in 44. They did not have the support of the 14th Air Force, which was a main element of overseeing the drive back to Formosa. And it became realized that not only MacArthur was going to go back to Leyte, but Luzon was going to be the stepping stone to get to Japan. Lingayen Gulf, January 9th. This is where they land. MacArthur said he could have the Tarlac Plain as well as Manila within 4 to 6 weeks. This is what he promised Roosevelt. This is his main strategy as far as coming back to the Philippines. Land at Lingayen, drive south through Tarlac, and take Manila. They need Clark Field more than anything else. Clark Field is the only field that can hold the heavy weight of the B-17 as well as the B-24 bombers until they can get San Marcelino set up at the Zambales coast later on. So this was the main drive that he came back had to have. As well, the port facilities at Manila. Lingayen, you do not have the capability to bring the supplies in to support all those troops that are pouring into Luzon. That's the main reason why they make the landing at Zambales with the 11th Corps on 29 January 1945, because they need Subic Bay at this time. As well, when they were coming to Lingayen Gulf, kamikazes were wiping out a lot of ships that were coming up up that west coast of Luzon, MacArthur has to have the port facilities to be able to support the campaign within the Philippines. This is the strategy that he has to go by, as well as the promises he made. Thing is, he had said in 44 when he took Biak that he would have the airfields there in time to support the Marianas. He wasn't able to come through with it. He wasn't going to let that happen this time. MacArthur also has other reasons. Redemption for the loss in the Philippines. The Philippines were a United States protectorate. He believed they had completely let them down. Quezon let him know that they had completely let the Philippines down by not being prepared and getting wiped out by the Japanese. The Bataan Death March, the surrender on Corregidor. This weighs on MacArthur's mind like nothing else throughout World War II, and the only way he can redeem the United States in his mind, and at least his own redemption, is by coming back to the Philippines at the head of the army, taking Manila, and driving the Japanese invaders out of the Philippines. The liberation of the POWs and the internees. 75,000 Filipino and Americans go into captivity. He knows they are sweltering in the camps. He knows they are being taken to Japan, as well as the civilian internees that have been locked up in Santo Tomas, Bilibid prison, Camp Holmes up in Baguio, as well as Los Baños. These people deserve liberation. This weighs on MacArthur's mind heavily as well. It's his obsession, especially after July 1943. William Dias, Melvin McCoy, Stephen Melnick, these are 3 of the 10 escapees that escaped from Davao Penal Colony. They arrive at MacArthur's headquarters. Chick Parsons, y'all know that name, I hope. He was the one who brought them back to MacArthur, and they got to MacArthur's office and told him of the death march. First time he ever knew about it. Told him about everything going on in the camps. And MacArthur said, "I will make them pay." So that's what I mean, MacArthur's obsession. Chick Parsons, Charles Smith, these are MacArthur's agents that he sends in the Philippines multiple times to organize the guerrilla movement there. Jaime Neri, lieutenant, down on Mindanao. They show their brand new Thompson submachine guns. MacArthur is pumping in materials into the Philippines to support that guerrilla movement. No fighting. All of you are just for intelligence purposes. I want you to lay low until we come back. This was one of MacArthur's main arguments at the Pearl Harbor Conference, that he will come back and all these people will be ready to go throughout. Fertig down on Mindanao, Peralta on Panay, Absidi Alcejo on Negros, Ingeniero on Bohol, Ganglion on Leyte, a score of them, the Hunters guerrillas, Markings guerrillas, Volkman's guerrillas, Andersons, Lapham, Ramsey, all on Luzon. They're all waiting for that return. I shall return, the pledge. MacArthur knows in his mind he has to fulfill this. This is his entire strategy of World War II. What's your strategy? I shall return. But there's never a directive to go back to the Philippines. This is just where MacArthur's going. And by his own willpower and by code breaking, he was able to pull it off. And these are the guys who pull it off. I mean, he's got great generals, he's got great officers, but each one of these Australian as well as United States soldiers are the guys who have to have it on their backs to bring MacArthur back to the Philippines. Like I said, his strategy, I shall return, is nothing but a march up to the Philippines. And the final thing, Manila's home. Not back in the United States. Manila is home to Douglas MacArthur. His father, Arthur MacArthur, his high point pinnacle of his career was here in the Philippines. MacArthur's first assignment, 1903, was here in the Philippines. His mother, Mary Pinckney Hardy, she dies in the Philippines. He brought her in October of 35, and 2 months later she died at the Manila Hotel. And he packed her in dry ice for 2 years. Until he could bury her at Arlington Cemetery in 1937. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Jean MacArthur, his second wife, he meets her in the Philippines. And Arthur, his one and only son, is born at Sternberg Hospital, born in the Philippines. Manila is home. And these are also where all his friends are. This is MacArthur's third term in the Philippines. He had 4 tours here. Manuel Quezon, Sergio Osmeña, Manuel Rojas, and that's Carino in the background, the 4 presidents of the Philippines. These are his best friends. He's not a colonial type guy hanging out with just white people in the United States. These are the people he hangs out with. These are his friends. He owes Manuel Quezon the debt. They are compadres. Quezon is the godfather to MacArthur's son Arthur. That's a connection, especially in the Philippines. And MacArthur will live up to that. MacArthur's whole modus operandi when he comes back is what Quezon wants. Now, I have all the documents in MacArthur Memorial. I brought them all with me. I've donated them here to the Ortigas Library, the copies of everything, so that everybody can look at it. But if you look at the message traffic between Manuel Quezon and Douglas MacArthur, everything that MacArthur does when he comes back are the instructions of Manuel Quezon. He was living up to that joint tie. Compadres. Manila is important to all his staff. This is the Bataan gang. Everybody brought off Corregidor by by PT boat and then flown to Australia. They are all Philippine hands, old Philippine hands. They are all people who are highly invested in redeeming and liberating the Philippines. The guy on the right, that's Joe McMicking. McMicking in Ayala on MacArthur's staff, loses his whole family. He waited 3 years to come back to find his family. He comes back to nothing but destruction and heartbreak. So to say that these guys came back to Manila and weren't really invested in what they were doing, it was just blowing up. No, these guys were highly invested in the Philippines. This was home to all of them, pretty much. Now, MacArthur's commanders. There's MacArthur coming into Santo Tomas right there. On his left is Oscar Griswold. He runs 14th Corps. That is the corps that runs the divisions, the 37th and the 1st, that will make the drive into Manila. Right behind MacArthur is Robert Biegler, 37th Division Commander, Ohio National Guard. Right behind him on his right-hand side is General Vern D. Mudge, 1st Cavalry Commander. And behind Mudge is William Chase, who runs the flying column that comes into the Philippines. Now, these guys are all raised on American military doctrine. And where does American military doctrine come from? Napoleon. Napoleon is the great theorist of mass and concentration, using artillery to mass against the weak points in order to break the enemy, in order to take those positions. Most of those guys come from West Point. That's all that's taught. U.S. Grant is the main central figure of West Point theory and philosophy. Mass and concentration. All these people had studied under that theory. MacArthur especially. The goal of war is victory. Tomorrow. Not protracted war for 10, 15 years. End it as quickly as possible and get the thing over with. That's how you limit casualties. Think about it. America's been embroiled in Iraq and Afghanistan for almost 12 years now. Japan and Germany were the greatest military powers that the world has probably ever seen, and took them out in 3 years. That's why MacArthur couldn't understand Korea. Look what we just did. How come this is going on for forever and ever? The atomic bomb changed everything. But this is what these commanders are all imbibed with. Mass and concentration, destroy the enemy as quickly as possible, limit the casualties, and get it over with. General Walter Kruger. He's the subordinate under MacArthur, controlling 6th Army. He is in command of all of those other commanders. He is 1 year younger than MacArthur. He has the same birthday as MacArthur. The United States was going to relieve him, and MacArthur was like, oh no, you send him out here to me. Probably one of the great unsung commanders. He enlisted as a private during the Spanish-American War, came to the Philippines, and worked his way up to full general. Now he believes Manila should be bypassed. He believes they should just go after Yamashita's groups, Shobu, Shimbu, Kembu, destroy the military force, and then take Manila afterward. MacArthur finds him completely stubborn. All of his staff, especially his chief of staff Sutherland, says, why don't you get rid of him? Even though MacArthur finds him completely stubborn, that's the guy he gives the 4th star to, because Kruger is the perfect balance of caution against MacArthur's boldness. MacArthur's like, let's go everywhere. And Kruger's just like, shut up. We're going to do it this way. And MacArthur, okay. Now, MacArthur can't bypass the city. Throughout, he's getting guerrilla reports. Andrews down on Negros, Vanderpool with the Hunters guerrillas, Ramsey, Anderson, Miller, who's with Markings guerrillas. All these people are telling him from late 44 until early 45 that Manila is facing starvation. This is one of the other main points MacArthur swayed at Pearl Harbor. If the United States does not relieve the Philippines, you will have more than 1 million Filipinos die of starvation if we bypass them. All these guerrillas are telling MacArthur that. As well, they're telling him what's going on in Manila. They're barricading streets, they're laying mines, but they're also telling him Yamashita's going to declare it an open city. The Japanese are pouring out of the city up to the north at an alarming rate. MacArthur trusts them, believes that the Japanese will not defend the city. Kruger did believe it. His intelligence chief did believe it. MacArthur's intelligence chief is a guy named Charles Willoughby. He says there's 150,000 Japanese in Luzon. Kruger's intelligence chief is a guy named Horton White. He says, that's crazy. There's over 275,000 there. MacArthur's intelligence chief, Willoughby, and Horton White got in a big fight one night. And after it was over, MacArthur took White into his bedroom and said, look, there's been 3 great intelligence officers in the history of warfare. Mine is not one of them. MacArthur knows that there are 275,000, but because of these reports, he believes that the Japanese will evacuate the city and they'll be able to push right in and take it over immediately. This is also the big factor. The Palawan Massacre. December of 1944, 150 prisoners are thrown into a trench. Gasoline is poured on them. They are all lit on fire, and they are all machine gunned unless they can get out. 6 of them are right next to the cliff, tunnel through it, and get out. Placido and Corpus, these are 2 of the guerrillas on Palawan, and they send MacArthur the messages in late December and then early January, just as he's landing at Langkawi Gulf, that if you do not release the prisoners at all those prisoner of war camps, this is what's going to happen to them. And that's why MacArthur, as soon as he lands, sends 6th Army Rangers down to release the prisoners at Cabanatuan, gets ready for a parachute drop on Los Baños, which won't happen till late February, but he knows, or he thinks, he has to drive into Manila immediately in order to liberate all the prisoners, Santo Tomas, Bilibid, in order to avoid the slaughter that has happened at Palawan. This is what weighs most on his mind about getting to Manila as fast as possible. They make the drive down the Tarlac Plain. Kruger is very stubborn, waits till his reinforcements land, 32nd Division, 25th Division, 1st Cavalry Division. Once they land, they start moving. This is Clark Field on the left. They seize that in late January, and then MacArthur goes to burn Mudge at Guimba and says, go to Manila, bounce off the Japanese, go around the Japanese. I don't care how you get there, but go there as fast as you can. The 3 serials of the Flying Column, under Labit, Haskell Connor, as well as Tom Ross, start making the drive down to Manila. Now, MacArthur believes in playing people off of each other to get the most. This is MacArthur with Robert Biegler, head of the 37th Division. The next day, after the day he told Vern D. Mudge, you're my guy. You're the one going in. You're the one I trust only. Next day he goes to Biegler. They were in the Rainbow Division together in World War I. MacArthur to Biegler. You're my guy. You're the one. You beat the 1st Cavalry into Manila. This is what he does. As well as his army commanders. 6th Army Kruger, 8th Army Lieutenant General Robert Eichelberger. These two guys hate each other, and they're always vying for the top dog. And MacArthur's the same to them. Kruger's in his office. Eichelberger's a kid. He doesn't know what he's doing. You're my guy. Kruger leaves the office. In comes Eichelberger. Kruger's an old man. He doesn't know what he's doing. You're my guy. And MacArthur will play these people off of each other. And so while Kruger's 6th Army is driving on Manila from the north, Eichelberger's people are coming in from the south. Now, George Kinney went to Eichelberger right before the Nazugbu landing on 29 January. And he said, look, I'll fly the whole 11th Airborne into Nichols Field. We'll drop them right there. Forget the landing down on the beach. We'll go in there, we'll drop the 187th, 188th glider, and we'll have Nichols Field immediately. It's a campaign of what ifs when we look back. What if this had happened instead of the drive up from Nazugbu up to the Gaitay, the drop there, move into Nichols Field and down to Fort McKinley where they get stopped up for about a week. Could have been a whole different campaign, maybe thrown it in a different direction. We'll never know. But Eichelberger, when he's told, I'll drop you in, ooh, no, I don't want to do that. That's why Eichelberger never gets his 3rd star. And MacArthur gives it to Kruger. On the right is the flying column heading down into Manila. This is what it looked like the whole time. It was no secret. Filipinos were going crazy, surrounding them everywhere they go. This is crossing the Agat River up there right south of the Calumpit as they're coming down towards Manila. And the Japanese, Yamashita 14th Area Army. He's divided his army into 3 groups. Yokoyama, Shizuoka Lieutenant General, has the Shimbu group up the mountains, Antipolo, to the east of us. Tsukuda has a Major General. He has the Kimbu group up near Clark Field with about 30,000. And Yamashita has about 150,000 up in the Cordillera, as well as Baguio and the triangle that he will hold throughout the war. Now, Yamashita always says he wanted to declare an open city, but he never did. Iwabuchi Sanji, Rear Admiral, given Manila Defense Force under Vice Admiral Denshiki Okochi. He says, you hold Manila as long as you can. Now, Yamashita, all these other army generals, they thought that holding Manila was ridiculous. It's not going to delay the Allied advance against Japan one day. Besides, it's flat ground. There's no way you're going to be hold off the Americans. But Iwabuchi believes, as well as Yamashita, even saying there's no glory in declaring an open city. And Iwabuchi believes that they will fight to the death to hold Manila Bay for as long as possible. They'll divide their forces. Now, Yamashita leaves Manila late December, early January. Iwabuchi's supposed to come under Yokoyama. They have these meetings in early January. Yokoyama says, you get out. Iwabuchi says, no way, we're going to stay. And Yokoyama goes along with it, as well as leaves army forces in the city itself. The Noguchi detachment is up north of the Pasig with about 4,500. 1st and 2nd Provisional Infantry, 1st Provisional Naval Infantry. Iwabuchi holds Manila proper. 3rd, or the 5th Naval Battalion, 2nd and 3rd Provisional Naval Battalions, and the 3rd and 4th Naval Battalions are going to hold Nichols Field and Fort McKinley down south at the Genko line. They'd always expected the Americans to come from the south, and this is the most heavily defended area. And they will strip those hundreds of ships of all their naval guns and set up artillery throughout the Genko line, as well as in city proper, in Manila. They say, there's like 990 20-millimeter pom-pom guns throughout Manila as well. Now, they have no doctrine. They have no training. The Japanese, that is. But when you're ready to fight to the death, that's all that matters. They barricade all the streets. They turn all those government buildings into fortresses, putting the automatic weapons as well as those artillery pieces in the doorways, in the windows, to hold off for as long as possible, mine everything they can, and everything is interlocking fire. And each little building becomes a fortress, as well as all those old houses that used to be in Malate are ermita. Those are old stone masonry foundations, and they're all little forts. And this is what the United States will have to deal with as they come into the city. And this is what brings on that murderous artillery fire, which will kill so many Filipinos. Second serial comes into the city of Manila, February 3rd, go into Santo Tomas, liberate the 3,500 internees that are there at that time. As the tanks, 44 Tank Battalion comes in. It's a very small contingent that comes into Santo Tomas. There's only a few hundred because they have to divide Troop F that goes off to Malacañang Palace to seize that, as well as they had another bit of their serial that tried to get down to take the Quezon Bridge, but they couldn't because they got stopped at Far East University and had to come back into the camp. And this on the right are some of the internees. You know, was it necessary? To every single one of them it was. Now, if you know Leslie Murray from Fame, that's her picture right there as a little girl in the picture sitting on her mother's lap there. Bilibid prison is liberated the next day, February 4th. The 148th Infantry comes in. They're moving down through the city, and they come across the walls of Bilibid. They don't even know that prisoners are in there, but they knock it open, and they look inside and say, "Hey, what are you all doing?" And nobody really responds until somebody throws a pack of old gold cigarettes in there. And then all of a sudden, hey, gosh, they're Americans. They take Bilibid prison, all the prisoners there, 500 that had been just transferred from Baguio camp homes down there, as well as about 800 American POWs. Aside from the 500 liberated at Cabanatuan, that's all that's left. All those 12,000, 14,000 Americans have been taken back to Japan on the hell ships, of which the United States was sinking as many as they could, not knowing the prisoners were on there. So the prisoners are safe. But then they start clearing North Manila, where the Noguchi detachment is, and the Noguchi detachment starts blowing up a lot of those buildings at the Escolta. As well, they start creating fires. This wasn't pretty much wanton destruction. They had set places that they were destroying all throughout, but the fires caught the wind. And the wind took it all the way through the city. The 37th will seize most of North Manila, north of Pasig, and the 8th Cavalry and the 5th Cavalry will swing east, because Kruger's plan is that once you get to Manila, you got to seize all those waterworks. You got to seize all the electrical power, because that's what's going to run the facilities in Manila after the battle is over. So the 8th Cavalry starts moving out to Novaliches Dam, as well as the Balara waterworks, and the 8th Cavalry gets in a pretty nasty fight up in New Manila, where the Japanese have many of those naval guns, and they take out about 4 M4 Shermans at that time, and the Americans figure out the Japanese, or that's when they figured these people are pretty much set in here. This is going to take a while. Now this shows north of the Pasig, and it's pretty much all destroyed by fire. The buildings are pretty much intact, but fire has wasted north of the city. They are pretty much standing. This will not be the same case down south. MacArthur comes in on 7 February, goes to Bilibid, goes to Santo Tomas, meets all the prisoners, says how this is the greatest moment of World War II for him. So much better to be a lifesaver than a life taker. But he's also got this idea for this goofy parade that he wants to have, where every commander will be in this procession that will go through the city and end up at the legislative building and give a broad talk releasing the city back to the civil government, because they don't know what's going to happen. This is planned in late January by this guy on the left. That's Bonner Fellers. He runs MacArthur's Psychological Warfare Group, and he's putting together all this plan. This plan goes through all the way till 14 February. After they've already crossed the Pasig, Provisor Island, the Paco District, all these horrendous fights that they're having there, and they think that they're going to still be able to pull off this parade. Now, General Kruger always said that he thought MacArthur wanted to get into Manila as fast as possible because he wanted to be there on his birthday, January 26th. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. MacArthur didn't write down every thought he had about what he wanted to do. There's no diary of MacArthur or anything like that. But the fact that they kept planning this parade as late as 14 February is just rather ridiculous. Now, February 7th, after MacArthur goes to Santo Tomas, that's where the first shells start falling into Santo Tomas, and that's where the shelling of the city really starts. They set up the artillery right there on the grounds of Santo Tomas and start hammering over the river. Now, a lot of this is counter battery fire. They've got spotter planes up in the air trying to find out where the Japanese artillery is. But because of the smoke, they can't really see. They've got no good intelligence. Now, MacArthur always restricted artillery fire in the city. He said you can only fire at targets that are known to hold Japanese. He was trying to limit those casualties within the city. But this will all change within the next couple of days. And from the 4th on through about the next couple of weeks, Ermita, Malate, Pasay, you're just getting hammered by artillery, which all the civilians are subject to, as well as the Japanese. And anybody trying to escape from the artillery fire, what do the Japanese do? They shoot them all down on the street. Anybody trying to escape, anybody in the street at Filipino, oh, you're a guerrilla. Just start wiping them out. Atrocities start. Crossing the Pasig. 1st Cavalry swings around to the east of the city. 148th and the 129th of the 37th Infantry Division will cross the Pasig River right by Malacañang Palace. They go across. They're in Amtrak's of the 672nd. And the first wave gets across pretty good. But then here comes that artillery, Japanese artillery again. And there comes the counter battery fire. Once more, all the citizens are under attack by American artillery as well as Japanese artillery, hammered and caught in between. They'll build a pontoon bridge. The engineer work of the Americans is pretty incredible. And the Yamashita said this is what he admired most about the Americans, was the ability to put together these things. But these pontoon bridges, they're very weak. They can't handle tanks. So as the Americans are going in south of the Pasig, they have no armor support. And it's not until the 14th that they can get the reinforced pontoon bridges to start getting across those Sherman tanks, those tank destroyers, to be able to close in heavily with the Japanese defenders. And the other thing, once they get that pontoon bridge, here comes all the refugees. And they're held up for quite a long time. Provisor Island and Paco. They need the electrical works at Provisor Island. Is it Provisor or Provisor? Provisor, excuse me. I'm a silly American. This is where everything changes with the artillery restrictions, because the 129th Regiment goes to Provisor Island, they lob 1,000 shells into the electrical works and think they'll just be able to cross the Estero to get inside of it, and the Japanese are still there. Casualties start mounting incredibly because don't have any of that tank support to get in close to be able to hammer inside. As well as in the Paco district, the railroad station, the school, the cemetery, the circular cemetery, which is still there. Concordia College. Casualty rates are staggering for both the 1st Cavalry as well as the 37th Infantry. And these guys had not had any replacements to their units since Leyte. They were coming in under strength as they got into Manila. And they're already almost about 30% down when they get into these fights at Provisor Island. Now, Robert Biegler says, that's it. I can't take it anymore. He feels his responsibility is to all those mothers in Ohio, not in the Philippines. And he says to MacArthur, I have to be able to use massed artillery to be able to take out all these positions, especially because everything west of the Estero de Paco is completely fortified and completely Japanese are going to fight to the death throughout this. And so after Provisor and the Paco district, that's where the artillery restrictions are lifted. And Biegler said, that's when I really went to town. It's all infantry tactics, though. I mean, you can use the artillery to go in, but almost in every building, they have to go in 3 or 4 times to be able to oust the Japanese, and everything becomes infantry, basically, to secure the rest of the city. And MacArthur will not allow aerial bombardment of the city at all. There are no airplanes. Now, General Kinney was always saying, hey, we don't have to lose a single guy. I can just have B-24s and B-17s flatten the entire city. But MacArthur was trying to save the city. Like I said, it's home. He knows that all these civilian casualties are mounting as they go through. And so everything becomes flamethrowers, bazookas, grenades, to try and get at the Japanese. They'll use mass artillery to try and get through the fortified positions, but that's what it's going to take to oust the Japanese. After the 14th, they can finally get the tanks in, and they can go right up to the places and start blasting inside. This is the worst episode in Pacific history, the destruction of this city, just because of what the Japanese did as far as fortifying the place rather than declaring it an open city. By the 12th, the United States has the complete encirclement of the city. 5th and 12th Cavalry have crossed the Santa Ana area at the Pasig, right down by, where's Sylvia Lichalco? You know, she's in here somewhere. Yeah, right by her house. They cross right there and start moving through the city. 8th Cavalry links up with the 37th. 5th Cavalry links up with the 11th Airborne. And now they've got the city completely encircled. And to try and squeeze the Japanese, the 11th Airborne is pushed up. They've taken Nichols Field. They've moved through Nielsen Field. They've moved into Fort McKinley. They come under 6th Army control at that point and take them away from Eichelberger. And then the 1st Cavalry will start moving north while the 148th of the 37th and the 129th start pushing west into the city, because that's where the Japanese 5th Naval Battalion, as well as all of Iwabuchi's troops, are now. Now, once the encirclement, that's gotten a little confused right in there. Yokoyama is in touch with Iwabuchi at this time. He's saying, I'm going to have a counterattack against the city. Now, Yamashita, in all his interrogations afterwards, said, no, that wasn't the plan. We were just going to harass the American army. But we know from captured messages that Yokoyama was in touch with Iwabuchi, saying, you hold tight there, and I'm going to move into the city through the north. But the 112th Cavalry Regiment combat team up near Marikina, Novaliches, they're able to hold them off. And Iwabuchi, he's not going to leave the city. What's the term? Gyoko Kusai? Glorious death. Fight to the death. Destruction of everything. Japanese choose complete nihilism over humanity. And Iwabuchi will make sure that they all fight to the death throughout the city. And that's where really the atrocities mount. You know them all. Fort Santiago, De La Salle College, Red Cross, every single house the Japanese could go into, and more despicable than anything ISIS could do, burning that Jordanian pilot. Just completely unbelievable. Past few months, researching on this, I've been an emotional wreck, as I know most of you. A lot of you were here for all of this. Just completely unbelievable man's inhumanity to man that happened throughout this city. 129th, 145th, after Provisor, after Paco, start moving through, and then they get in this 10-day fight at the new police station. Same thing all over again, these 45 positions, Santa Teresita College, the shoe factory. Then after that, through the city hall and the Manila post office, same thing, artillery obliterating, try to go in, kicked out 2-3 times until they can finally get in and eradicate every single last Japanese that's holding the place. University of the Philippines, now artillery's hammering it, especially the medical school there. And there's 7,000 patients inside. And once the Americans find out on the 16th that there's all these patients, that's when the artillery stops, because they know that they're all in there. And then they just start hitting at the foundation of the building because they don't want to eradicate. 2,000 come out the morning, 5,000 come out that night, that they've now liberated through them. Like I said, a 10-day fight to be able to push through. And while they're pushing to the west, the 5th, 8th, and 12th Cavalry starts pushing through. 16th, Rizal Stadium, a horrendous battle there. Bonner Fellers again. All the letters that he wrote home, I've donated those here. And he meets a refugee coming out of that area. And it's just a woman completely dirty, clothes completely torn, totally bestraggled with her baby in her arms, and comes up to Fellers, thank you, thank you. And Fellers, how could anybody be thankful for anything at that point? 19th through the 22nd, the cavalry moves up Dewey Boulevard, High Commissioner's Office, Army-Navy Club, Manila Hotel, same thing as before. MacArthur's there, the 22nd, as the fight ends at the Manila Hotel. Everything he ever owned in his life is in the penthouse. It's all destroyed. When he goes to Corregidor, everything he owned stayed in the hotel. We have the inventory of everything that was in there. Japanese made a great inventory. 11th Airborne captured it. It's all there. I think it's online right now if you go to the MacArthur website and can see it all. Now, we did an interview not too many years ago with a guy named Mark Hunter. He was with the 44th Tank Battalion. And he said, you read any book, they say the Japanese blew up the apartment. But Hunter said he started taking sniper fire from the roof. And so he started hitting it with tracers and caught it on fire. That's what destroyed it all. And after the battle, everybody's like, wow, the Japanese destroyed it. And Hunter was like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Because he didn't want to get in trouble. And then finally, the assault on Intramuros. And every piece, now this is Balete Pass. Balete Pass? Balete Pass? Balete. Okay. 8-inch howitzer, 105s, 155s, 240 millimeter artillery are all amassed to take out Intramuros. Once again, George Kinney, the air chief, said, just let me flatten it by air power. MacArthur again, no, but it doesn't matter. They had so much artillery that was going to obliterate this place. The Japanese had already burned it out pretty much completely anyway. And so they start hammering the walls. 8,000 rounds launched into the city. 129th, which had been pulled out of the battle, comes back across the Pasig, moves in through the north of Intramuros. The 145th comes in from the west. Now this is a diagram. Every little dot on there is some kind of Japanese mine, artillery position, machine gun position. This place was thoroughly fortified to hold off the Americans, but 8,000 rounds catch them completely by surprise. And the 129th, 145th are able to get in. Of course, they'll have a massive fight at Fort Santiago, 20-foot high walls, 40-foot thick. And they're all inside the walls. It's a 5-day battle to be able to take it out. But you see Intramuros today, that's what it looked like then, afterward. And like Biegler said, we really went to town to be able to take out Intramuros. And this is what it looks like inside as the Americans go through. 2,000 murdered at Fort Santiago. 2,000. All the women and children are able to get out, but all the men had been rounded up, over 14 years old, all massacred. And finally, the end, the government buildings. Again, 5th Cavalry, 145th go into these buildings, or 148th, and same thing as before. They're all obliterated. Japanese had mined them, blew up the first floors, and the Americans finally go in as what it is. The 27th, Malacañang Palace. MacArthur turns the Philippines back over to the civil government. MacArthur's so destroyed, cries throughout the speech that he gives, just blubbering like a baby. Now, MacArthur's an arrogant guy. MacArthur has a great ego, but he's also got a big heart. And when I first came to the archives, I didn't really like Douglas MacArthur. But after 20 years, you kind of see what the guy's like. And he's kind of schizophrenic because there's two sides to him all the time. But at Malacañang, the Japanese made us destroy what I tried to preserve. Mr. Osmeña, I give back to you the citadel of democracy in the East, and not much left. So was it necessary? Well, that's pretty much a philosophical question, isn't it? I mean, you can't, there's, like I said, there's so many what ifs about this battle, but what was and what happened is what happened. And I don't think we've all come here for the past few weeks, next few weeks, to commemorate it, but more to honor the dead from what happened. There's the city, completely destroyed. 2/3 of it at least. 100,000 civilians dead. Japanese atrocities as well as American and Japanese artillery. Could it have been avoided? Yeah, Japanese should have declared it an open city like MacArthur did in 1942 and got out completely. There's no use of holding Manila whatsoever. Why they didn't is beyond everybody, pretty much. And they also should have surrendered. You're going to lose. You know, why hold out till the end? But they did. 16,000 of them went down to the sword. And like I said at the end, they chose nihilism over humanity. So was it necessary? No. You know, the thing that I have the worst problem with is the complete destruction of Malate, Ermita, and Pasay by the, basically American artillery. But there's been a lot come out lately. The Japanese guns at Antipolo, they're aimed at the city. Are they firing at the city? That's the question we still have to explore. Japanese, Peter Parsons through work to find out Japanese have mobile artillery, mounted 75s on trucks, moving all around. The spotters can't see that. They've also got these artillery simulators, which we know is set up at the General Hospital, which sounds just like artillery to confuse the Americans, bring on the artillery. But mostly I think that John Lucas is doing a book on the Battle for Manila right now. He's interviewed a lot of these 37th guys. Units would be going through the city. Filipino comes up to him. So glad you're here. How many people you got? 35. I'm going to get you some water, get you some beer, bring it back. There, Makapili. Here comes a mortar fire, wiping out whole units. And so after that goes on, none of them care. Let's get this thing over with and hammer them with everything we got. So that's what happens. Like I said, MacArthur said the Japanese forced him into everything he was trying to avoid. He says in his own book, it was the complete spiritual and physical destruction of his soul to see all of this. Aftermath, he goes to Japan. He tries to give advice to the various Philippine leaders, but he's not here to help. Everything he's concerned with is rebuilding Japan because he's an army guy taking orders. That's his job. They should have made him high commissioner in the Philippines. They should have made him a representative to the Philippines and let him do what he did in Japan here in the Philippines. Because there's so much after the war, especially when Osmania is being forced to try all the collaborators. Another thing Quezon didn't want and MacArthur didn't want the United States involved at all. That's a Philippine issue. And you got Secretary Ickes, who's head of the Secretary of Interior, threatening Osmania with rehabilitation funds unless he does what the Americans want. Should have made MacArthur the guy here. Could have been a lot different. But then again, it's all the what if. What if this? What if that? That's pretty much it. Like I said, I really don't have many opinions. I'm just telling you what I've seen in our own archives. And you can check it all out because I've given everything here. And it's up for you to decide. And I imagine we'll be talking about this for the next 50 years. Thanks, y'all.